I know retrospectively I'm gonna be appreciated as a mayor that lived up to what I said I was going to do. I'm not gonna do that now. You know, people always crap on us when we in the ring. But when my gloves are hung up, they said that was an authentic, bald-headed, earring-wearing brother that did his thing as the mayor of the city of New York. The most important city on the globe is being run by a person who was dyslexic, arrested, rejected. Now I'm elected to be the mayor of the city.
By a federal grand jury.
In the last Olurinatti production on Eric Adams, I declared to y'all that I was an Eric Adams hater, but I'm a hater with lots and lots of reasons. And I walked you through how New York City ended up with Eric Adams as our mayor, straight through many of his disastrous decisions like bringing back stop and frisk, worse than ever before, reviving NYPD units that were disbanded for their disproportionate use of police violence against Black and brown people, concealing Riker's death from the public, and the Department of Justice being outed for making up stories about dead policemen, slashing budgets in education, homelessness services, pre-K funding, the library, Riker's reentry programs, and parks, all while giving NYPD historic new deals and millions more dollars than ever before, fear-mongering about Black and brown immigrants, and using a migrant crisis to stoke xenophobia and blame migrants for budgets he's been cutting since the moment he came into office and resources he's never provided, and just generally being a cop-loving, fear-mongering piece of shit. And as I'm sure many of you already know, that since making that first video, I've actually had the opportunity to confront Eric Adams to his face about many of these decisions on The Breakfast Club, and you know how that went.
When I went to do an analysis with all of my gang members and I asked them the question, you know, how many of you have learning disabilities? How many of you are dyslexic?
And all of your gang members?
Yeah, there's a lot.
That's what you decided to characterize them?
With people who
you kick it with the gangs?
Okay. No, I meet regularly with people.
But more on that later. Not only has Eric Adams' tenure as mayor been marred by scandal after scandal, all of which have illuminated not just the many failures and corruptions in his administration, but his own morally bankrupt nature. Eric Adams has been involved in scandals and accusations of corruption dating all the way back to 1993. Yet, despite scandal after scandal shining a flashlight on Eric Adams' misdeeds, most have been a blip on the media's radar, who paid them very little attention until the FBI started closing in on him. They seized them phones, they got warrants, they served subpoenas, they raided the whole team, resignations started dropping, and the block is officially hotter than ever before. So, our first time around, I told y'all why everybody hates this nigga, but today, I'm gonna tell you why the FBI and the US government does too, because this motherfucker just got indicted. Eric Adams told me he was gonna make history, and I'm actually proud to report that he was right. He is now the first New York City mayor to be federally indicted while in office, and his resignation is imminent, and we love to see it. So how do we get here, everybody? Let's go on a journey, shall we? The thing about Eric Adams is he is a fear-mongering buffoon of a cop. Maybe you've seen when he created a video, I swear to God, is not an SNL sketch, teaching parents how to search their children's rooms for crack cocaine and guns.
You write the Constitution. There are no First Amendment rights inside your household. So by periodically sending a message to your home that there are no rooms off limits, you don't believe in locked doors, your house is open to inspection, but you always have to inspect what you expect. You can look at a jewelry box. A jewelry box of this nature, maybe a simple jewelry box, but if you look through it closely, you don't know what your child may be hiding. For instance, a gun could be hidden, a small caliber weapon could be hidden inside a jewelry box. So when your child brings in his popular knapsack with many different locations, look through it to see what exactly is your child carrying in addition to a book. Something simple as a crack pipe, a used crack pipe. Could he have found it on the street? That's quite possible. Behind a picture frame, you can find bullets. What does that mean to find bullets? Does it mean your child is carrying a gun? No. Where there's smoke, there's possible fire. The baby doll could be just a baby doll, but also it could be a place where you can secrete or hide drugs. Run your hands over the pillows. This one could be hidden inside a pillow, a gun. Just look and see what's inside your bookcases. Perfect place to hide cocaine. There are no First Amendment rights in your home.
Or maybe you've seen any of the millions of times he's calling whoever the he's pandering to at any given moment, insert city here of America.
New York City is the Athens of America. It's the Istanbul of America. It's the keys of America. It's the soul of America. We are the Tel Aviv of America. New York City is the Islamabad of America. The Zagreb of America. We are the Lima of America. New York City is Mexico City of America.
Or maybe you've seen him just generally be the stupidest person to ever exist.
When you look at the totality of the year, if you had to describe it, and it's tough to do, in one word, what would that word be, and tell me why?
New York. This is a place where every day you wake up, you could experience everything from a plane crashing into our trade center to a person who's celebrating a new business that's open.
The problem, though, is that bufoonishness may make him the butt of the joke, but it doesn't disempower him or encourage people to take him or the real danger he poses seriously. People don't investigate, and then they don't realize that who Eric Adams really is much more insidious. Ironically enough, in a rare act of good governance, it was actually Eric Adams' similarly disliked counterpart in bad governance, Governor Kathy Hochul, who signed the legislation that extended the statute of limitations on the New York Adult Survivors Act, effectively leading to one of the nails in Eric Adams' coffin. Many people are aware of the New York Adult Survivors Act and the fact that survivors were given an additional year to file their lawsuits because the world was stunned when Cassie Ventura sued P. Diddy for a litany of sexual, physical, and emotional crimes. Since then, more survivors have been coming forward. And one of those survivors is a black woman named Lorna Beach Mathura, who filed suit against the New York City Mayor Eric Adams himself, who'd coincidentally given Diddy a key to the city. So what happened? So let's take it all the way back to 1993, when Eric Adams was a transit cop for the NYPD and the president of a fraternal organization within the NYPD that was specifically dedicated to helping black employees in the NYPD, called the Guardians. Lorna was an administrative aide in the NYPD at the time, and a colleague of Eric Adams. Lorna had been expecting a promotion that she believed she had gotten passed up for because she was black. And Lorna said that that was par for the course being a black person at the time. But because Eric Adams specifically held himself out as this champion of civil rights for African Americans, she thought she could trust him to protect her and go to bat for her. So she reached out to him. She was actually thrilled when he agreed to help her, and he offered to give her a ride home after work so that she could tell him about her problem. But instead of taking her home, Lorna said she noticed that when they left the police department, instead of driving to her house in Coney Island, he was driving in the opposite direction, toward the Hudson River. So she asked him where was he going. He told her that, quote, he wanted to have more time with her, and he pulled into a remote, vacant lot away from the street. Lorna said she was afraid, but she kept telling herself, no, I'm safe. Eric Adams was a police officer and the president of the Guardian. He was someone who was there to help her, but she said her anxiety remained, so she kept asking him questions. She asked him, well, why are you parking? And he told her he wanted to concentrate on her story without being distracted by driving. But instead of actually letting her tell that story, Lorna said he told her that he thought he could help her, but he also needed some help. And this man started rubbing his fucking dick through his clothes and told her she needed to give him a blowjob. Lorna said that she was stunned and she refused, but he did not care. He continued, quote, repeatedly cajoling, demanding, and begging her for oral sex. And eventually, he just straight up unzipped his pants and whipped his fucking dick out, grabbed Lorna's hand and put it on his dick and demanded a hand job. When she continued to refuse, this man just jacked off in front of her, came on this woman, and then on top of all that, instead of even dropping her home like he promised he would, after driving in the opposite direction from her home and sexually assaulting her, he dropped her at the nearest station from where he assaulted her and he drove off. Lorna never formally reported it because she was actually convinced that Eric Adams would retaliate. She did eventually informally tell a supervisor, and Lorna says she was then transferred and demoted, and she believes that that was Eric Adams' doing because she refused to give him the blowjob he demanded. Speaking for Lorna, her lawyer said, quote, She knew that filing this lawsuit would cause her significant personal challenges, but she did so nevertheless, because she believes sexual abusers must be held to account no matter who they are. Her fearlessness and quest for justice are inspiring as they are important. Eric Adams' response was that this didn't happen, and that he can't recall ever meeting this woman that he worked with.
Hi, Mr. Mayor. Can you please respond to
this lawsuit? It absolutely did not happen. I don't recall ever meeting this person, and I will never harm anyone in that magnitude. It did not happen.
Pretty much anytime he's asked about the allegation, he begins avoiding eye contact and stuttering through a similar response to this.
I would never do anything to harm anyone. Just really, it's just something absolutely that has never happened. And I don't even recall ever meeting the person who made this allegation.
Lorna was devastated and traumatized by the experience because she had only put her trust in Eric Adams, specifically because of how he held himself out as someone who was a protector of African Americans, as someone who was battling racism and abuse from the inside. But instead, she'd experienced what she called, quote, an astonishing abuse of power, that there was, quote, no way to safely report at the time. But she was moved to finally speak up because she was tired of seeing his hypocrisy during both his campaign as mayor and his administration, while he pretended to battle for Black people inside and outside of the NYPD. New York City has a similar relationship with Eric Adams, the man who held himself out in his mayoral campaign ads as someone who became a police officer to battle racism in the NYPD from the inside, but became our mayor and immediately reinstated stop and frisk, ran cover for officers who kill New Yorkers, and revived NYPD units that were specifically disbanded for disproportionate use of police violence against us. Although Eric Adams claims not to know Lorna or what she's talking about, she is neither the first nor the only Black woman to work with Eric Adams in the NYPD to accuse him of sexism and an abuse of power. In 1991, Lizette LeBron was a 24-year-old transit cop in Eric Adams' department, literally just starting out her career. She found out that some of the members of Eric Adams' fraternal organization, The Guardian, had cheated on their sergeant exams. And when she made the decision to report their cheating to Internal Affairs, Eric Adams set out to destroy this woman. For daring to follow the rules these police claim to protect, Eric Adams went to the press and told them that this 24-year-old Black woman was making up the allegations because she wanted one of the men and he rejected her sexual advances. And he then gave the press bikini pictures of her to exploit. Lizette said that it brought her to such a dark place and it literally destroyed her career. Meanwhile, the three men Lizette had accused of cheating had cheated, and they were criminally charged and convicted. While Eric Adams masquerades like someone who was fighting racism from the inside and protecting Black people, he was actually abusing his power and retaliating on the real whistleblowers. That's who Eric Adams is, and it's who he's always been. So how did we get here? Last time I presented y'all my theory on how New York City got stuck with Eric Adams, which I attributed to a combination of factors, from his significant union support, his deceitful ads targeted at the Black community, where he presented himself as some sort of Black activist who became an officer to fight police brutality from the inside, ranked choice voting, and just the general liberal urge to elect a Black cop because he would allow them to put a Black face in the police state status quo in order to use diversity to hide behind the illusion of progression and shield the administration from accusations of racism and anti-Blackness. But there's another theory as to how New Yorkers got stuck with the mixiest mayor we've seen in a long time. And this one's less a theory and more like a fact that came with 6 criminal indictments, and every single person involved has since pled guilty. In July of 2023, Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg indicted 6 people for conspiring and diverting tens of thousands of dollars in public money into Eric Adams' campaign for mayor in exchange for construction contracts on the back end. Kickbacks.
New York City contractors tonight are charged with illegally funneling money to Mayor Adams' campaign. Prosecutors say the contractors managed to go around the campaign donation limits by using straw donors to make extra contributions. Those contributions were then matched by the city. The mayor's campaign insists they knew nothing about the illegal donations. Here's Eyewitness News reporter Lauren Glassberg.
These 4 defendants are charged in a scheme to raise money through straw donations for Eric Adams' mayoral campaign in 2021. The idea, according to the 27-count indictment, was to give out money orders to people who would then donate that money to the campaign, and the money would be matched by public funds. So a $250 donation would garner a $2,000 match. The defendants would then allegedly pressure the mayor's office for construction jobs, assuming Adams was elected.
Eric Adams, of course, denies any involvement in this scheme that directly benefits him, despite knowing and working with the individuals involved in the scheme, and despite the fact that in the emails between the individuals charged and convicted for the involvement in the scheme, one of the men, Shamsuddin Reza, tells retired police inspector and colleague and friend of Eric Adams, Dwayne Montgomery, to show Eric Adams which construction job he wants once he's elected. As well as they did a wiretap on all 6 people and got hours and hours of extensive conversation about the scheme.
I got you now, SpongeBob!
In one email between 2 defendants, Shamsuddin Reza writes to Dwayne Montgomery, a retired police inspector, about a potential construction project in Brooklyn, saying, FYI, this is the one I want. Safety, drywall, and security. One project, but we can all eat. Please show it to him before event. It will start when he's in office.
DA Alvin Bragg has never accused or indicted Eric Adams or anyone in his administration. Likely because it would create a fight between he and the mayor. He's already busy with his case against Donald Trump. And the FBI has got Eric Adams covered. But if we just use our common sense and think about it for a second, all of these people were not just indicted and convicted for stealing public money and putting it into Eric Adams' campaign in exchange for lucrative contracts. They've pled guilty to it and admitted to it. So how do we think such a plan could have worked without Eric Adams' involvement and knowledge? Despite the fact that we literally fucking know all the donations to his campaign weren't on the up and up because we have 6 guilty niggas hemmed up for it and he was denying any knowledge of this happening, he suddenly wants us to believe, quote, we returned back tens of thousands of donations that did not follow that muster. We did the internal scrutiny we're supposed to do. Eric Adams' buddy Dwayne Montgomery pled guilty and was given all of a $500 fine and 200 hours of community service. And you know what, the same Eric Adams who could care less about poor black and brown New Yorkers dying on Rikers because they can't pay bail thinks about that? He said that after the guilty plea, Mr. Montgomery should be allowed to go on with his life, saying, quote, the worst day of your life does not define your life. He said he had not communicated with his former friend since the indictment, but if he were to see him, he would wish him the best. And Dwayne Montgomery is far, far from the only good friend that Eric Adams has suddenly wanted to distance himself from once they came under criminal scrutiny. Because don't be mistaken, despite the fact that DA Alvin Bragg hasn't gone after Eric Adams directly, that has not stopped him or the FBI from rounding up everyone around him, because that's how this works. Before you face the final boss, you gotta knock off all the pawns. Think about Donald Trump, who's also in Alvin Bragg's crosshairs. Before Trump ever saw a single criminal charge, many of his people were charged and or convicted. Y'all remember that pastor that went viral back in 2022 because he was live streaming in a church service when he got robbed at gunpoint in the middle of the service, and he told us the niggas made off with millions of dollars worth of jewelry, and everyone was just like, why do a Brooklyn pastor have millions of dollars worth of jewelry and Gucci down from head to toe? Right, that nigga, Lamar Whitehead, aka Pastor Bling Bling. Like, that nigga really called himself the Bling Bishop. It was given scammer because that nigga was a scammer. And I'm not just referring to his June 2024 conviction for fraud for stealing $90,000 from people in his congregation. No. This nigga was already a convicted scammer, fraudster, and identity theft before then. And that's the nigga Eric Adams was claiming as his fucking protege and mentee and running all around Brooklyn doing business with. It's undisputed that Eric Adams claimed him, and Whitehead was known for leveraging his relationship with Eric Adams to make money and do deals in Brooklyn. Funny enough, like the 6 people who were charged and convicted for the straw donation scheme, the Bling Bling Bishop has been on record saying that Eric Adams offered him a $50 million construction contract. In 2023, The New Yorker published an expose called How Eric Adams Started Mentoring a Con Man. In it, they tell the story of a man named Brandon Belmont, who contacted the U.S. Attorney's Office in Manhattan to report that the mayor of New York City is trying to extort me through someone else, he told them. That someone else was Lamar Whitehead, aka Bishop Bling. The FBI showed up at Belmont's door the day after he contacted the U.S. Attorney's Office. They wasn't playing with him. I told y'all, they're on Eric Adams' ass. And Belmont then told the FBI that shortly after Eric Adams became mayor, Lamore Whitehead went to his car shop in the Bronx because his Benz had been in a crash. The cost of fixing the Benz was $25,000, but Bishop Bling wanted Brandon Belmont to do it for $13,000 in exchange for a kickback from Eric Adams. In addition to owning the car shop, Brandon Belmont owned real estate and he had a property in the Bronx. So Bishop Bling proposed to him that if he did the job for $13,000, Eric Adams would make the property a homeless shelter so he could get city benefits. Belmont told the FBI that Bishop Bling even offered to set up a meeting between Belmont and Eric Adams. So that's how Bishop Bling ended up on the FBI's radar. Shortly after, Bishop Bling would end up being indicted by the FBI for fraud and extortion, and after prosecutors successfully argued that he not only finessed one of his congregants out of $90,000, but he also attempted to extort Brandon Belmont for money in exchange for kickbacks from Eric Adams, he was sentenced to 9 years in prison. And Bishop Bling offered his 2 cents as to why the FBI decided to go after him. Take a listen.
I want to be really clear. Why was Bishop Whitehead on trial? Okay? Why was Bishop Whitehead on trial? This was not about Bishop Whitehead, y'all. This was politically driven. This was about Mayor Eric Adams.
And hey, look, 2 things can be true. Is Bishop Bling probably guilty of all the scamming they say he is? Yes. Why, yes. Is it true that the FBI probably only went after him because they're trying to get Eric Adams? Probably also true. And speaking of 2 things being true, it can be so hard to determine what's true or not, especially when everyone is targeting you with clickbait news to do for this coverage from the source of that. So for example, I'm across an article published worldwide. The sources like the right-leaning New York Post and the left-leaning The City emphasize his not guilty plea and the details of his charge. But some sources, like left-leaning, depending on who you ask, CNN, claim he's set to be arraigned. See how, depending on where you get your news from, you could have a totally different perspective on the issue. On top of that, Brown News provided a factuality rating, indicating how subjective or objective their printed reporting is. And they even go out of their way to highlight stories that the media isn't covering with their blind spot feed. It really just cannot be beat because it makes it so much easier for me to make sure that I am not spewing unsubstantiated mess at y'all, which is why it was a no-brainer access to all their supporting my work. I told you, the government is on Eric Adams' ass and they rounding up his boys. It's like that moment in the Narcos and Mafia movies when the government starts taking out everyone closest to the boss until the boss is held up in his office scared, knowing he's next. Yeah. And Bishop Bling isn't the only mentee of Eric Adams to be into criminal shit and end up in prison. His old mentees were 2 brothers named Robert and Zan Pastroyans, and those 2 men own a Manhattan restaurant named La Baya that Mixie-ass Eric Adams be regularly at to this day. And it's not even hating to call Eric Adams Mixie, because this egomaniac brags about it. He literally told reporters, quote, "I'm the nightlife mayor. This is a 24/7 city. I'm obligated to go patronize my restaurants, patronize my theater." Alvin Bragg also recently hemmed up Eric Adams' senior advisor turned buildings commissioner, Eric Ulrich, who was a former Republican city council member. Think about that. Eric Adams brought on a Republican to be his senior advisor before becoming his buildings commissioner. DA Bragg indicted Eric Ulrich for accepting $150,000, quote, in exchange for performing official favors from his various positions in city government, including his time atop the buildings department, which has the power to make or break a development project. End quote. This indictment said this nigga was accepting apartments, Mets tickets, suits, surrealist art, and more in exchange for kickbacks. And Eric Ulrich resigned shortly after being indicted. And this is not the first time we've gotten legal indication that maybe Eric Adams' campaign for mayor wasn't all in the up and up. Remember how I talked about the IRS getting him for lying on his forms and disclosures in the last video? But now he's in deep, deep shit, and it is getting deeper every day. This nigga might actually have to resign. So let's get into the FBI's investigation into Eric Adams, shall we? Why is the FBI after Eric Adams? Remember how Alvin Bragg successfully hemmed up those 6 associates of Eric Adams for creating straw donor schemes to funnel money into Eric Adams' campaign illegally? So you probably won't be surprised that there are more straw donor schemes. Remember how I told you Eric Adams' mentee, Bishop Bling Bling, was trying to bribe folk in exchange for construction deals and kickbacks from Adams? Right, so again, you won't be surprised. There's more of that. But there's a lot more than that. So, the first thing I need everyone to understand is that Eric Adams is not in a little bit of trouble. This is in a lot of trouble. Government officials are not allowed to accept donations from foreign governments. And the FBI both believes and has proof that Eric Adams conspired with the Turkish government to funnel illegal campaign contributions into his campaign, that he muscled city officials into opening a midtown skyscraper built by the Turkish government before it had passed muster with safety officials in 2021, the moment he won the Democratic primary. This nigga didn't even wait to officially take office to start getting his fucking deals lined up. And they also believe he conspired with China. So, let's establish a timeline leading us up to the bomb that just exploded in Eric Adams' face. Because I am a firm believer that when the feds want you, the feds gonna get you.
Now we can do this the easy way or we can do it the hard way. The choice is yours.
The streets first got word that the feds were building a case against Eric Adams in November 2023, when the FBI raided Eric Adams' 25-year-old campaign fundraiser, Brianna Shug's home, and left her house with all her electronics, and manila folders literally mocked Eric Adams. And then just a couple of weeks later, the FBI rolled up on Eric Adams himself to straight up seize this nigga's cell phones and his iPad, and the dominoes have been dropping since. What's crazy about Eric Adams is when this first happened, he and his team tried to throw the campaign fundraiser Brianna under the bus to save face. They were actually trying to tell the media that they are just so committed to following the law that they conducted their own investigation and discovered wrongdoing on someone's part, wink wink, and that they voluntarily told the feds and had them seize the phones, and the feds aren't actually looking into them. And then a couple of weeks later, they got rid of Brianna. What a bunch of And it's wild because Brianna Shuggs was a 23-year-old with absolutely no experience besides working for Eric Adams' staff in a much lesser role while she was in college. And when critics questioned why he'd be entrusting her with such a serious position as campaign fundraising, he insisted she was the woman for the job and she's excellent, only to throw her under the fucking bus. And even if we didn't all know that this was a lie, this whole idea that the FBI wasn't looking into Eric Adams himself, because Eric Adams was literally on his way to DC to harass Joe Biden and continue to stoke xenophobia for his migrant crisis, and was supposed to be in all-day meetings and had to suddenly spin round when he learned the feds had a warrant for his ass. Just look at how this nigga reacted when I asked him about it.
Law enforcement does something every day, it's bad. But when they do something against Eric Adams, oh, it's good. You know, come on, let's make up our mind.
I said what happened.
Okay.
I didn't say that it was good. I don't think it's good that our mayor is being investigated for illegal campaigns. I don't think that's good.
I came back because of not that they had to take my phones. That is not true. And you should.
I said it happened that day.
No, it did not happen that day.
I said it was reported before you were going that you were on your way to. Yes, it was, Mayor Adams.
It was reported wrong.
Where your phone? Did the FBI seize your phone? Did they search your top aides?
Not that day.
Did they search the home of several people? Okay.
Yes.
That's what I said.
Does that seem like someone who voluntarily asked the feds to come get his stuff? But Eric Adams insisted on trying to convince the public that he was not the target of the FBI's investigation into his campaign. Make it make sense, sir. In July 2024, the feds served a whole new round of subpoenas on Eric Adams, his election committee, and City Hall, looking into Eric Adams and his aid, travel, and fundraising. And that was just the beginning, because in the month of September, the feds got on Eric Adams' ass. And as of September 25th, 2024, they have indicted him. But before we get to the indictment, I gotta walk y'all through how serious shit got for Eric Adams and his administration this month, leading up to this point where reports are speculating that his key fundraiser, Brianna Shuggs, will also be charged. So Winnie Greco is Director of Asian Affairs, as well as at least 3 other NYPD officers. So, this month of September, the FBI executed search warrants, seized phones, raided homes of more than half a dozen of his senior officials in his administration, including, on September 4th, the Fed straight ran up on the police commissioner Edward Caban, Eric Adams' mayoral advisor Timothy Pearson, the first deputy mayor to Eric Adams, Sheena Wright, his school's chancellor David Banks, and that nigga's brother Philip, the deputy mayor for public safety. By September 12th, the NYPD commissioner Edward Caban had resigned. But before we even get into Caban's resignation, I would be remiss if I did not highlight that he is not the only NYPD officer being caught up in this probe, because After my Breakfast Club interview with Eric Adams, the NYPD was very upset at their boy's performance, so they made it their business to harass me openly and publicly for all to see from their official Twitter accounts, which was ironic considering in my interview with Eric Adams, I explicitly mentioned how NYPD uses their social media to harass journalists and anyone they disagree with, and Eric Adams dismissed me.
Random acts of violence are being highlighted. If you have 24 hours in a day, and something that happens to you in an hour in a day, you start to define yourself as that entire day. Those random acts of violence are plastered on social media. They're plastered on
by the NYPD Twitter page.
They're plastered on everything. People begin to believe that, I'm living in a city that's out of control. We are not.
She made a good point, though. If NYPD is reposting that kind of stuff, what are we supposed to think?
I said at the beginning.
Everybody got a phone, brother.
No. NYPD's page is doing this. Has recently been there so much so that they're arguing with journalists on there. It's NYPD on their own Twitter pages that are posting and sensationalizing crime.
The main officer who was harassing me on Twitter was Chief of Patrol John Chell, who importantly murdered a black man in 2008, and his family was awarded a $2.5 million verdict. And despite thousands of people seeing that man harass me and rightfully alarming me and many others, because again, this is an officer who murdered a black man, when Eric Adams was informed by reporters of this harassment and questioned as to whether he'd intervene, he said this: "So, color me unsurprised that the same John Chell is caught up in the FBI's investigation of Eric Adams' corruption, so he immediately raced to put in for retirement." And when the New York Post tried to get a comment from their boy John Chell about the investigation, I say their boy, because don't forget, the New York Post was working with NYPD to slander my fucking name following my interview with Eric Adams too. John Chell responded by calling the reporter a fucking scumbag. I love that. Sounds like he's mad. Let's see how retirement goes for you, shall we, Officer Chell? All my enemies is catching. And it does not end there, baby. When I tell you the feds are on these asses, the feds also raided the home of Rana Abasova, one of Eric Adams' aides in his international affairs office. They raided Cenk Okal, a former Turkish Airlines exec who worked on Eric Adams' transition team. Remember, I told you that also on the Fed list is the deputy mayor of public safety, Phil Banks, who was an unindicted participant in a corruption case a decade ago, and Tim Pearson, a retired NYPD inspector and Eric Adams' senior advisor. The Fed suspected they were involved in steering city contracts to companies purportedly represented by his consultant brother Terrence Banks, who the feds believe Adams was giving millions of dollars worth of contracts. And when I say millions of dollars, I don't mean a few million. The feds are looking into the $154 million contract that was given to Philip Banks' former company to provide services to NYCHA housing. The feds raided and seized the electronics of both Phil Banks, Tim Pearson, Terrence Banks, and Eric Adams' first deputy mayor, Sheena Wright. And all of these characters and their relationships to Eric Adams are so interesting in their own rights.
The breakdown of those being investigated by the FBI reads like a who's who of the mayor's inner circle. Last week, the FBI raided the uptown home of First Deputy Mayor Sheena Wright. Wright shares the home with David Banks, New York City Schools Chancellor. David Banks is the brother of Philip Banks III, Deputy Mayor for Public Safety. The New York Times is reporting that Deputy Mayor Banks is part of an FBI bribery investigation. Agents took the electronic devices from those two homes and that of a third Banks brother, Terrence, who runs a consulting firm. Their father, Philip Banks Jr., was an NYPD lieutenant when Adams was a captain.
Tim Pearson isn't just one of Eric Adams' top aides and subjects of this federal investigation. Oh no, he is his senior advisor, longtime friend, subject of an existing investigation into a brawl at a migrant shelter, and a nigga facing multiple lawsuits for sexually harassing women that Eric Adams is using taxpayer dollars to defend him against. Which I guess isn't surprising, considering that Eric Adams is using taxpayer dollars to defend himself against the sexual harassment allegations I told you earlier. Birds of a feather. In addition to illegal connections to Turkey, the FBI is also investigating Eric Adams' travels and ties to China via his relationship with its Director of Asian Affairs, Winnie Greco, who the feds also believe played a part in illegal campaign donations, and thus they raided her fucking offices of the New World Mall in Queens that hosted Adams' campaign operations in 2021, and multiple Pelham Bay homes that are owned by Winnie Greco. Also suspiciously, following the raids of Winnie Greco's offices, she was given a raise by Adams. Winnie Greco is one of the people expected to be indicted with Eric Adams. And speaking of Eric Adams' illegal ties to China, We know that's real because in March, Chinese media mogul and former nightclub owner Quinn Hume pled guilty to illegally funneling more than $11,000 worth of donations to politicians in New York and Rhode Island, including Eric Adams. The FBI also searched the home of New York City Sheriff Anthony Miranda, who Eric Adams personally appointed.
Another official under scrutiny is Sheriff Anthony Miranda. The Department of Investigation is reportedly looking into allegations that his office stole cash during raids on illegal weed shops. Plus, whether or not he solicited any donations as the chair of the National Latino Officers Association in exchange for looking the other way on targets being investigated by his office.
So, it should come as no surprise that after all those raids, the resignations have been coming left, right, and center. So, on September 12th, the NYPD Commissioner Edward Caban had resigned, which is great. Rewatch the Rikers section of the first Eric Adams Olurinatti production to get a refresher on what a demon that man is, who was also personally appointed by Eric Adams. But also, read up on his cover-up of NYPD's killing of 32-year-old Kowalski Trawe. Caban's resignation marks the shortest tenure of NYPD commissioners in 30 years. And let me tell you something, you know the feds on Caban's ass because not only did they search him and they investigated his brother, but when he resigned, they also searched his temporary replacement, Thomas Donlin.
To be the first Hispanic police commissioner is an honor of the highest measure.
Yet 14 months later, Caban stepped down after the FBI seized his phone last week. In his resignation letter, Caban says he did not want to be a distraction during the federal probe that Fox 5 has learned may be connected to his twin brother James and a third brother Richard. James Caban was fired by the NYPD in 2001 for allegedly trying to frame a New York City taxi driver. He runs a firm that does security for New York City nightclubs. Sources tell Fox 5 that he is part of a corruption investigation. Their connection to Mayor Adams is through their father, Juan Caban. Juan Caban and Adams both ran organizations in the 90s that supported minority police officers.
On September 15th, the mayor's chief legal counsel, Lisa Zornberg, straight jump ship, resigned. And on September 16th, 2 former fire department chiefs were arrested and accused of accepting tens of thousands of dollars in bribes to speed up the fire safety approval for building projects across the city. We're gonna get back to that when we go through the indictment. On September 20th, the FBI subpoenaed the head of Eric Adams' Office for Asylum Seeker Operations, Molly Schaefer. On September 24th, the school chancellor, David Banks, resigned, and the feds made it known that they're not just investigating Eric Adams' ties to Turkey, but to 4 additional countries.
School's chancellor, David Banks, is the latest person to announce he is leaving the Adams administration. In a resignation letter, he says he is retiring by the end of December. Conversations Banks says he had with the mayor early this year. This comes as Banks, his fiancée, Deputy Mayor Sheena Wright, and the chancellor's 2 brothers had their homes raided by the feds. Also this week, City Health Commissioner Ashwin Bassan says he will be resigning by the end of the year.
The FBI also served subpoenas on even the Monsignor of a Brooklyn church that does business with Adams' former chief of staff, power broker Frank Carone. And funny enough, on the night of September 25th, when Eric Adams was indicted, Frank Carone was seen leaving Gracie's mansion.
So it's possible that this is multiple sorts of branches of the same investigation, that in the course of doing one investigation, prosecutors stumbled upon other crimes and began branching out the investigation. That wouldn't be at all unusual. Much of the early interest, some of the early indication that we had involved these investigations about Turkey. Perhaps it was some sort of bribery or pay to play. We don't know, but prosecutors have likely been to the grand jury, obtained an indictment that will be unsealed, and we'll learn more about the details of what they're alleging once they unseal that indictment.
So, what this very, very tangled web should have revealed to everyone is that Eric Adams has been involved in a very large, lucrative web of kickbacks, bribes, and illegal money and relationships with foreign governments. But that still did not stop Eric Adams from getting up in front of the cameras the moment the news of the indictment hit the press to tell us these niggas just praying on his downfall.
My fellow New Yorkers, it is now my belief that the federal government intends to charge me with crimes. If so, these charges will be entirely false, based on lies.
But listen, don't mind him, because this morning, the 57-page federal indictment against Eric Adams was unsealed, and it's wild what this is on. The federal indictment opens by making it clear that they have evidence of Eric Adams' ongoing corruption and illegal donations stemming not just from his tenure as mayor, oh no, but dating back a decade to when he first became Brooklyn Borough president. They've got a decade worth of investigation on this nigga. In 2014, Eric Adams, the defendant, became Brooklyn Borough president. Thereafter, for nearly a decade, Adams sought and accepted improper valuable benefits such as luxury international travel, including from wealthy foreign business people and at least one Turkish government official seeking to gain influence over him. By 2018, Adams, who had by then made known his plans to run for mayor of New York City, not only accepted but sought illegal campaign contributions to the 2021 mayoral campaign, as well as other things of value from foreign nationals. As Adams' prominence and power grew, his foreign national benefactors sought to cash in on their corrupt relationships with him, particularly when in 2021 it became clear that Adams would become New York City's mayor. Adams agreed, providing favorable treatment in exchange for the illicit benefits he received. After his inauguration as mayor of New York City, Adams soon began preparing for his next election, including by planning to solicit more illegal contributions and granting requests from those who supported his 2021 mayoral campaign with such donations. Eric Adams, the defendant, sought and accepted illegal campaign contributions in the form of nominee or straw contributions, meaning that the true contributors conveyed their money through nominal donors who falsely certified that they were contributing their own money. By smuggling their contributions to Adams through US-based straw donors, Adams' overseas contributors defeated federal laws that served to prevent foreign influence on US elections. Wealthy individuals evaded laws designed to limit their power over elected officials by restricting the amount any one person can donate to a candidate. And businesses circumvented New York City's ban on corporate contributions by funneling their donations through multiple employees, frustrating a law that seeks to reduce corporate power in politics. Adams increased his fundings by accepting these concealed illegal donations at the cost of giving his secret patrons the undue influence over him that the law tries to prevent. Eric Adams, the defendant, compounded his gains from the straw contributions by using them to defraud New York City and steal public funds. New York City has a matching funds program that matches small dollar contributions from individual city residents with up to 8 times their amount in public funds to give New Yorkers a greater voice in elections. But Adams' campaign applied for matching funds based on known straw donations, fraudulently obtaining as much as $2,000 in public funds for each illegal contribution. Adams and those working at his direction falsely certified compliance with applicable campaign finance regulations despite Adams' repeated acceptance of straw donations, relying on the concealed nature of these illegal contributions to falsely portray his campaign as law-abiding. As a result of those false certifications, Adams' 2021 mayoral campaign received more than $10 million in public funds. Eric Adams, the defendant, also sought and received the improper benefits from some of the same co-conspirators who funneled straw donations to his campaigns. In particular, a senior official in the Turkish diplomatic establishment, the Turkish official, who facilitated many straw donations to Adams, also arranged for Adams and his companions to receive free or discounted travel on Turkey's national airline, which is owned in significant part by the Turkish government, to designations including France, China, Sri Lanka, India, Hungary, and Turkey itself. The Turkish official and other Turkish nationals further arranged for Adams and his companies to receive, among other things, free rooms at opulent hotels, free meals at high-end restaurants, and free luxurious entertainment while in Turkey. Eric Adams, the defendant, and others working at his direction repeatedly took steps to shield his solicitation and acceptance of these benefits from public scrutiny. Adams did not disclose the travel benefits he had obtained in annual financial disclosures he was required to file as a New York City employee. Sometimes, Adams agreed to pay a nominal fee to create the appearance of having paid for travel that was in fact heavily discounted. Other times, Adams created and instructed others to create fake paper trails, falsely suggesting that he had paid or planned to pay for travel benefits that were actually free. And Adams deleted messages with others involved in his misconduct, including in one instance, assuring a co-conspirator in writing that he always deleted her messages. In September 2021, the Turkish official told Eric Adams, the defendant, that it was his turn to repay the Turkish official by pressuring the New York City Fire Department, FDNY, to facilitate the opening of a new Turkish consular building, a 36-story skyscraper without a fire inspection, in time for a high-profile visit by Turkey's president. At the time, the building would have failed an FDNY inspection. In exchange for free travel and other travel-related bribes in 2021 and 2022 arranged by the Turkish official, Adams did as instructed. Because of Adams' pressure on the FDNY official responsible for the FDNY's assessment of the skyscraper's fire safety was told that he would lose his job if he failed to acquiesce. And after Adams intervened, the skyscraper opened as requested by the Turkish official. They outline how Eric Adams not only accepted hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of illegal donations from Turkish nationals in exchange for kickbacks, contracts, their political influence over him, luxury trips and gifts he never reported, but he also illegally received more than $10 million in New York public funds, directed his staffers to engage in these illegal deals, straw donor schemes, and false certifications to the government. In fact, the indictment highlights how Eric Adams threatened employees with termination if they wouldn't carry out his illegal request on behalf of the Turkish government, as well as he directed his staffers to delete the evidence. My favorite highlight from the indictment is that when one of Eric Adams' staffers was approached with the offer to accept illegal campaign donations, the staffer was like, no, that's illegal. Eric Adams is not gonna do that. And Eric Adams was like, nigga, what? Absolutely do it. The indictment reads, on June 22nd, 2018, the same day as the fundraising event just described, the Adams staffer and the promoter discussed by text message a possible trip by Adams to Turkey. The promoter stated in part, fundraising in Turkey is not legal, but I think I can raise money for your campaign off the record. The Adams staffer inquired, how will Adams declare that money here? The promoter responded, he won't declare it, or we'll make the donation through an American citizen in the US, a Turk. I'll give cash to him in Turkey, or I'll send it to an American. He will make a donation to you. The Adams staffer replied, I think he wouldn't get involved in such games. They might cause a big stink later on, but I'll ask anyway. The Adams staffer then asked, how much do you think would come from you? $7? The promoter responded, max $100,000. The Adams staffer wrote, $100,000? Do you have a chance to transfer that here? We can't do it while Eric is in Turkey. To which the promoter replied, let's think. After this conversation, the Adams staffer asked Adams whether the Adams staffer should pursue the unlawful foreign contributions offered by the promoter, and contrary to the Adams staffer's expectations, Adams directed the Adams staffer to pursue the promoter's illegal scheme. But while that surprised the staffer, the reality is that illegal donations has been Eric Adams' bread and butter for at least a decade, so it should be no surprise that the indictment includes text messages of Eric Adams telling his staffers to always delete their messages. It reads, Eric Adams, the defendant, continued to conceal the benefits he received from foreign nationals seeking to gain influence over him. Adams did not report any of the 2019 gifts he got from the airline manager or the promoter on his annual disclosure form. In addition, in March 2019, while exchanging text messages to plan another possible trip to Turkey, in which the airline manager would arrange travel for Adams, the Adams staffer texted Adams, to be on the safe side, please delete all messages you send me. Adams responded, always do. This indictment really is a treasure trove, because like I said earlier, when the feds want you, the feds are going to get you, and the feds don't indict you until they already have you. The case is already built. They conducted an extensive investigations, wiretaps, email searches, they've got it all. Another highlight in the indictment is that Eric Adams changed his cell phone passcode from a 4-digit passcode to a 6-digit passcode, and he told the feds that he changed his password to prevent his staffers from deleting any messages or information inside. Yes, the same staffers the indictment provided text messages showing that Eric Adams instructed them to delete their messages. Yes. But that's what Eric Adams is claiming, okay? He is claiming that he changed the passcode to stop them from deleting it, and now he doesn't remember the passcode. The indictment reads, on November 6, 2023, FBI agents executed a search warrant for the electronic devices used by Eric Adams, the defendant. Although Adams was carrying several electronic devices, including 2 cell phones, he was not carrying his personal cell phone, which is the device he used to communicate about the conduct described in this indictment. When Adams produced the personal cell phone the next day in response to a subpoena, it was locked, such that the device required a passcode to open. Adams claimed that after he learned about the investigation into his conduct, he changed the password on November 5th, 2024, and increased the complexity of his password from 4 digits to 6. Adams had done this, he claimed, to prevent members of his staff from inadvertently or intentionally deleting the contents of his phone, because according to Adams, he wished to preserve the contents of his phone due to the investigation. But Adams further claimed he had forgotten the password he had just set and thus was unable to provide the FBI with a password that would unlock the phone. What's interesting about this particular nugget is it seems on its face buffoonish, right? That he would think changing his passcode would keep the feds out. And the idea seems buffoonishly consistent with the kind of buffoon who the feds have in 4K telling his staffers to delete their texts. But what's interesting is the FBI actually does find it impossible to break through iPhone passcodes, especially when it's a 6-digit code. And Apple refuses to break in for the FBI, and the courts have refused to compel Apple to break in for the FBI to be able to get into the particular phone. However, the FBI has not struggled to build a massive case against Adams without that one phone, because they successfully seized and accessed all the other electronics and that of half of his administration, as well as the 7 people we already discussed earlier have already pled guilty to the straw donor schemes. But don't give Eric Adams too much credit, because he and his band of fools really are just as buffoonish as you think. Actually, they're worse, because if this shit wasn't in the indictment, I wouldn't believe it myself. Tell me why, when the feds were interrogating Breonna Shows, Eric Adams' campaign fundraiser he threw under the bus, Shorty tried to go to the bathroom to delete the incriminating evidence. The indictment reads, the Adams staffer also agreed to speak with FBI agents and falsely denied the criminal conduct of herself and Adams, among others. At one point during her voluntary interview, the Adams staffer excused herself to a bathroom and while there, deleted the encrypted messaging application she had used to communicate with Adams, the promoter, the Turkish official, the airline manager, and others. They are literally just as fucking buffoonish as you think.
You guys are from Turkey. Brooklyn loves Turkey. Brooklyn is the Istanbul of America.
That was New York City Mayor Eric Adams playing himself in a 2017 Turkish film in which Turkish men attempt to bribe New York City Mayor Eric Adams.
And you know what? None of this stopped Eric Adams from still trying to bullshit New Yorkers with a press conference where he tried to surround himself with black people and paint himself as a black mayor unfairly targeted by the FBI. I would be remiss if I didn't point out that this is Eric Adams' usual playbook. Whenever he's criticized or investigated for his wrongdoings, he cries black. And he also loves getting whatever black activist is for sale to cover for him. Following my interview with him on The Breakfast Club, in order to try to preempt New Yorkers seeing the interview the next day and me exposing him for his cover-up of deaths at Rikers, his willful blind eye to the NYPD's murdering of innocent New Yorkers like Wynn Rosario, cutting funding for reentry programs at Rikers, and overall being at the helm of one of the most anti-black administrations responsible for, again, I can't get tired of reminding y'all, reviving stop and frisk, as well as reflooding our streets with NYPD units that were disbanded for disproportionately brutalizing us. He went and got Al fucking Sharpton to baptize him at Rikers. So I say that to say, I was unsurprised and unmoved that this integralist nigga got up in front of New Yorkers and tried to gaslight us while cloaking himself in pay-to-play niggas. And lucky for me, black New Yorkers were just as unmoved at him trying to pretend that being held to account for decades of corruption had anything to do with him being black.
This is not a black day. This is not a black day. This is a youth day. This is a youth day, Eric Adams. This is not a black day. Your policies are anti-black. You are disrespect to all black people in this city. The things that you have done are unconscionable.
Maybe the outdoor press conference was a bad mistake.
Maybe. Our children are harassed by the police. This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. You can shush me all you want, but the people are with us. And this is not a black day. This is a justice day.
And you know what? More importantly, let me tell y'all something. If you are a black person saying something silly like, oh, they let the white mayors be criminals, it's unfair that they're going after him. If there were ever a nigga who deserves to feel the weight of the criminal system's disproportionate desire to punish niggas, it's the nigga is that champion that system and weaponize it against poor black and brown New Yorkers every fucking day. Fuck that nigga. This is a man who does not bat an eye when corrections officers allow people to die in Rikers. Actually, he does bat an eye. He does more than that. He runs to Rikers to support the fucking corrections officers. Fuck the families. Fuck the dead people. Eric Adams, a man who stole $10 million from New York's public funds, spent the last 3 years slashing our budgets and social services and telling us to blame the migrants. He was working with foreign governments to accept illegal funds, accepting kickbacks and traveling all over the world while taking your taxpayer dollars and telling you to blame migrants. The fucking irony. This is a man who is stealing millions and demanding due process and the presumption of innocence. But just the other day, he told us all it was justified for NYPD to shoot 4 fucking people in the station over $2.90 in unpaid subway fare. I cannot express this enough. Fuck that nigga. Don't defend him, because Eric Adams not only wouldn't defend you, he would direct his Department of Corrections to cover up your death. The only thing you need to do for Eric Adams is ask him to resign. Because New Yorkers need and deserve a mayor and a strong administration, not a corrupt fool and his equally corrupt administration who will be far too busy defending themselves against federal crimes they're absolutely going down for to run this city correctly.